higher post was Johann Bauer, later to be known to life as John Bauer, her father. Both of his parents had died when he was living with his stepmother in the village of Winterkasten, Germany. And at the age of 14, the day after his confirmation, he left his child at home, and he walked across the mountainous roads to Darmstadt, a distance of about 20 miles. Eventually, an uncle in Philadelphia invited him to come to this country to live with him and his family. He accepted the invitation and arrived in Philadelphia in 1891. Seeking to enter the ministry, he applied at Mission House in Sheboygan County, Wisconsin. He was accepted, and his work as a minister began following the completion of their 9-year program. Belden, where mother was born, was his first pastorate. The congregation was mostly Swiss. They remained in Belden for 3 years, moving when mother was around 4 months old. They came to Wisconsin, to the Oshkosh area. And by the time she graduated from high school, she had moved with the family 6 times in 3 states. When mother was 7, they moved to North Dakota, to a German-Russian settlement not far from the Canadian border. Her father wrote in his autobiography, "The congregation appealed to us. The good people were willing to hear the old gospel." Our work at this place has been perhaps the most happy in our ministry. She told her children of an experience there when she was very young. She was playing with the railroad tracks. A train came by, and one of the workers on the train shouted to her. She didn't know what he said. She didn't speak English. She ran home, and she asked her mother in German, "What does this mean?" and repeated the phrase, "You'll get killed." Now, if you can imagine that as a parent, you'll get an idea of how her mother felt, what her reaction was. She couldn't speak English until she started school in the area where they had lived. And the family was there long enough that she graduated from 8th grade and went on to high school there. Then they left, according to her father, due to circumstances beyond her control, to accept a call in Clark County, Wisconsin. Thus, they moved again, while mother's older sister stayed behind to attend normal school in Minot. When they moved to Clark County in 1922, mother was in her senior year of high school, with just a little over 2 months left until graduation. Now, there was a tradition during the graduation ceremony. A graduating senior, as representative of the senior class, would pass a memento to a representative of the junior class. And the student who had earned the honor was mother. Now, you can imagine there were those who didn't think that was fair. Here's a student who had been in their school not even 3 months, and they would have the honor of representing their class. She earned it, she deserved it, and it happened. It appeared that there were often sharp divisions within the congregations in which her father served. And moving to Clark County, he found the same situation. It was already well in progress when she got there. And I'm wondering, does anyone have any idea as far as what would have been going on in the church, the German church at that time? What would split the congregations? The language. Some people wanted English, and the old-timers, they wanted German. It was very difficult to satisfy both sections, her father wrote in his autobiography. It was a real problem. It was an unfortunate situation for Reverend Bauer, the church history records. school there. And she went on to Cincinnati to attend Deaconess Hospital for nurses. And she loved Cincinnati. It was a far cry from the towns that she lived in with a family. She graduated from there and went on to become a registered nurse. Registered, in fact, in 3 states. And during her nursing career, she did private duty nursing with patients ranging from an obstinate man in the Ozarks who was hired by a family. He didn't want any care. He wanted nothing to do with her and did everything he could to make her life miserable. To the other end of the spectrum, here in Wisconsin, where she cared for Mrs. Kohler at the time of the birth of her son, Walter Kohler. Leaving Cincinnati, she moved down to Kansas City, Missouri. It was the Jazz Age, the Depression, the Pendergast years, as they were known as, with the situation in government and the city. She had many stories to tell. She talked a lot about the weather, how hot it was. She told us that people slept on the fire escapes to escape the stifling indoors. In Kansas, she met a man named A.D. McDaniel, known as Mac. She and Mac were married in 1934. And a year later, they became the parents of a baby girl, Danine. Mac introduced her to horse racing, taking her to the tracks where he bet on horses. He had a cabin in the Ozarks. He took her fishing. There was a downside to marriage to Mac. He'd been in France in World War I, in the Battle of the Meuse-Argonne, and he was plagued by nightmares throughout their marriage. And his health was not good. In addition to war, there was his job. He had been a brakeman on the Rock Island Railroad, and he had a severe leg injury incurred in the train yard in Dodge City, Kansas on a warmest night. It was due to the negligence of the railroad. He sued. He sued the Rock Island Railroad to recover the money that he had to pay for medical and surgical bills. And it ruled in his favor. And of course, the railway appealed, saying, you knew the dangers of this job when you took it. You shouldn't have been where you were. And you didn't need to go to any other doctors. You went to a doctor, which of course was a company doctor. So it went to the Missouri State Supreme Court. And the decision was upheld. His leg had become badly infected, and he had those underlying conditions associated with war injuries, as well as damage to his lungs. Mother was working as a nurse. He wanted her to stay home and take care of him. I couldn't, she told me, 40 years later, shortly before she died. Someone had to feed us. I realized that she had lifelong guilt when she told me I was a nurse and I couldn't save him. He died August 1936. His health was very fragile, and the immediate cause of his death and his death certificate, the heat. Kansas City, August, and it was a record-breaking 113 degrees on the day that he died. Following his death, and she may have been in a nurse's uniform, she was in an elevator. There was another person in there in the elevator. It was a man. And at one of the floors, another man got on. Did your Mac die? One asked the other. No. Was the answer. Why did you put in a bill? She never knew the difference. Did he? I asked my mother when she told me. Yes, she said. Why? I asked. Her answer, what choice did I have? And I thought of Mac's lawsuit with the railroad. Would that be any recourse for a widow, a single woman, at that time, or any time? A woman speaking out against a professional man in Kansas City, which wasn't exactly known for clean government. What power? What power did she have? I looked at those jars of cold cream in the dresser, my mother told me once, and I thought, how useless. How useless they were. I couldn't read that. And she had Danny to feed. And there was another factor. Unknown to Mother at the time of Mac's death, she was pregnant. And at some point, Danny was sick, and Mom took her to the hospital. And she left her there. At least I know she's being fed, she wrote in her journal. Well, the hospital left notices: either you pick up your child or you will lose custody of her and you'll never see her again. So of course, Mother picked her up. Following the birth of a second baby girl, Pauline, she came to Wisconsin. She had family here. Her father had since retired from the ministry due to ill health, and all her sisters were off on their own living here. She was living with two little girls in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, and working the night shift as an RN at the Deaconess Hospital. And one evening, it was a hectic shift, and she dug down the stairs to take a break, and she was immediately called back. There was a new patient admitted, a farm accident. It's a bad one, she was told. Well, she did go back to tend to a new patient. And that's how she met my father. And soon after they were discharged, she was courting her. He took her to the farm to meet his father. I saw those fruit trees, she told me, and I thought, my children will never be hungry again. Well, they married, and eventually 2 more children were born, my brother and I. Even before they were married, Mom told him she would never work in the barn. Well, she may have never worked in the barn, but she fed the harvesters, as the other farm wives did, served as a nurse to farm workers who were injured on the farm, and at least on one occasion in my memory, went to the home of one to care for a sick child. Animals too were her patients, as she cared for sick and injured farm animals and pets, as well as the canning and preserving and everything else that comes with the territory. Now, one time when I was very young, I liked to pretend. And one day I was pretending I was poor, and my dolls needed to be fed. So I asked Mother, if you didn't have much money, what food would you buy? Rice, she responded. Rice triples when it cooks, and it can be used to stretch foods. And often when I cook rice, I think of that. Well, there were good times. She loved baseball. We went to Milwaukee County Stadium with a local 4-H club to watch the Milwaukee Braves. And when they played Cincinnati, she loved it. And if the game would have been televised, you would have picked her up crowd. You would have seen her. She was the only one cheering, her arm in the air as the opposing team ran onto the field, calling, "You beautiful Cincinnati Reds." She always wanted to go back to nursing after her children had grown, but she never did. And she often wished she had. Over in later years, I've wondered if she did, what would it have been like? Would it have been like her father, with the changes in the church, where it was no longer the old gospel? It had been 30 years since she had last worked in nursing, 30 years at least. Would she have accepted the changes? In thinking about Mother, what stands out to me is she was a person who highly valued intelligence. If you brought anybody home, there were 2 things. Hygiene. She had an absolute fetish about cleanliness. The other thing was their intelligence. And she loved all kinds of music. She loved books and reading, a love that she passed on to all of us. One of my earliest memories of her reading to my brother and I, while we were studying her. And as we got older, she got us read to her, because she worked around the kitchen, read from our books. And what stands out too is her respect for others and not drawing conclusions. Because you don't know. You never know what's going on in their lives. And her life was an example of how quickly things can turn. And your life can change through no circumstances. Through circumstances of which you have little or no control. And the need to keep going, drawing on your strength. And the practical aspect of sorting out what's going on, what needs to be done, and how to get there. And though I loved growing up on the farm when I was very young, Mother added a different dimension. It was as if she opened a door. Just a crack. Just stand over here. Just a door. There's a world beyond this community. And you can take steps to get beyond that door. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. That was wonderful. Now, this is a part of the service that is not well choreographed. So it's Cindy Hill, Ina's daughter, very kindly. She and Dawn did not want to have a memorial service, but she said it would be okay if we wanted to remember Ina. But Cindy does like to talk about her mother, and I think this process of putting together these pictures, I think was helpful to her. So she's definitely a part of what's happening today, because a lot of this is her work. So we have photos from Cindy, and I think there may be some from Jen's as well mixed in here. And it's not necessarily a narrative behind it, but Cindy did write something which I will read, and Jen's will sort of keep the slides coming as I read it. And I will invite you to come up if you have an Ina Hill story you want to share after we're done with the slideshow. All right. Arriving like an angel from heaven, Ina Lee Landley was born on the Sabbath on October 3rd, 1937. She was born at 9:30 a.m. on a rainy day in a farmhouse in Tennessee. Her father was in Chicago, and Ina traveled to Tennessee to have the baby where her mother lived. Maybe that's her mother's name. It looks like Ina, but it's maybe Inez. Okay, that makes sense. Inez is her mother. Ina weighed 7 pounds and was 22 inches long. She had black hair and brown eyes. Her skin was pink, and she was described as beautiful by her mother. She was named Ina after her Aunt Edwina and Lou for Louis Landley, her father. Ina's proud mother, who was Inez Irene LaFera Landley. Ina was all right. photos is probably the best way to do it. Oh, that's adorable. All right, I think this is the final picture. This is a picture of Cindy and Taco. And Cindy did write a poem that I'm going to read now. Sleeping Christmas 2020. A peaceful holiday gone away. You left us on a winter day. You left without a chance to say goodbye. Graceful, peaceful, and with dignity. Your love will never die. You left a space big and void. Your smile just formed the moon. You left your love shining bright. Our mom, our friend, our life. We love you, Mom. Rest in peace. Love, Cindy and Taco. Now, if anyone has any thoughts they want to share about Ina, I would invite you to come forward.
Well, the first time I met Ina, I met her twice actually in my life. We were in our 40s, later 40s, and we were beginners in adult ballet. And one of the first things us older women found out that, these lovely little moves that little girls make, they look just delightful. It doesn't look so sweet in a teenage lady, but we enjoyed it. And she was lovely in herself. She was gracious, refined, fine. And later, the second time I met her was here. That was many years later. And then I got to know her person. And she's just as lovely, refined, gracious, all the way through.
Cindy was my high school classmate, and And so I've known Ina for quite a long time, and I have memories because of her arthritis. She did a lot of exercise, Tai Chi, and now I'm learning she learned ballet, and you would often see her walking just to uh, keep those joints working, right? So I have those memories. The other thing is that when I came back from living in California, I had to take over my mother's garden because my father had a stroke and she sort of neglected it. She didn't have time for it. And Ina, as I'm sure has happened to many people here, Ina offered me flowers from her wonderful spring shade garden. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do this memorial at this time of year is because many of us have associations with those flowers that she gifted to others or swapped with you. And I still look at the flowers in my garden that I got from Ina, and I remember her. Last fall, Tara and I went out, thanks to Sue Bouchard. Sue Bouchard gave us the bulbs, and we planted bulbs in honor of Ina. And they are coming up. Tara and I may have had doubts about that because it was like November or something, and we were shoving them in the ground as fast as we could. You might not want to go out there today, depending on what it's like when the service is over, but hopefully in the next few weeks, because of the late spring, they're only now coming up, so the timing was perfect. And I think we'll continue to look at the spring flowers and remember Ina. Does anyone else have anything to share?
About 10 years ago, I was living on 7th Street in River Falls, and Ina and John lived nearby. And she would be walking. She'd be walking in the neighborhood. But she wasn't just walking, she had a backpack on. And in her backpack, she was carrying canned goods. And I asked her, I invited her onto my porch to have a cup of tea. And first she said no, but then she agreed to stop and visit for a bit. And I asked her about the backpack. Was she carrying books or what was that about? And she said she was carrying canned goods so that she could maintain her strength. And that carries with me that even if we're ailing, we need to maintain our strength. And keeping in mind the flowers, that also is a strengthening idea. And the other thing that really strikes me about Ina is she was a wonderful member of the poetry group here. And she would bring her 1927 children's reader with such wonderful literature that the children had a century ago. And that we can give our children the best of our times, even in the most difficult times.
Hi, I'm Vicki, and I think I'm going to speak for my husband, who met Anna the first time when she was being an aide at the elementary school that had pulled us to Wisconsin. And the friendship that they developed, and it developed further here, I got to share, and it was just lovely knowing her. And John.
Well, with that, I think we'll move on. so I promised in the newsletter we'd sing this song because it's kind of a lullaby, or at least a children's song, so it reminds me of Mother's Day and it reminds me of the garden and the bulbs that we planted for Ida. All right. I'm lost.
So are we all lost. It's nice to be lost together.
Yeah, well, somehow this wasn't set up in a way that makes sense from the words up there. It took me a while to figure out you guys were all lost, but we'll try again another time.
That's a deal.
All right, so program committee meets this week. I hope it'll be a short meeting because I actually have another meeting at 7. And then, big important announcement. We have our annual meeting next week. So we want you to be here. If you absolutely can't come, then we need a proxy vote from our members. So, and I think you can talk to Nancy about that. Nancy, Elizabeth is over there too, so we've got a couple of board members here at least. Am I missing somebody? And they will give you more information. And then the following week, Paula is back with a Widen the Circle forum. And we'll all be looking forward to that. Those have been well attended. And we'll learn how to talk to each other in this polarized situation that just keeps ratcheting up week by week. All right. And we do have coffee. So those of you who are interested in coffee or tea after the service, we invite you to join us.
There's also some muffins in there.
Oh, there's muffins. Ooh. Ooh. Anyone else have announcements? Yeah.
For those people in Congressional District 3 that didn't already sign the ballot petitions that Ann had, I do have ballot petitions for Rebecca Cook. If you're interested in signing for her, you can only sign for one candidate. So if Ron Penny is your congressperson, you're in District 3.
All right, I think, all right, we're time for closing words.